Hi everybody, welcome to our June Center for Identity webcast. I'm Katie Stevens, the Center for Identity's Education Program Manager, and I'm here today with Jared Wise, who is the Director of Public Relations and Outreach for the Better Business Bureau of serving Central, Coastal, Southwest Texas, and the Permian Basin.
It's a long name.
It's a very long name. And Jared is here to share his expertise with us today about small businesses and identity theft. We're going to cover small business identity theft and scams, as well as some information about data breaches for small business owners. And Jared's going to talk a lot about the experience that he's had at the Better Business Bureau with those things. Yeah. If at any point anybody has a question, feel free to enter it into our chat box or send us an email, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Excellent.
So, Jared, why don't you kick us off with just a general description of what business identity theft is?
Well, and there's a different variety of what people think business identity theft is. You know, we've heard the big data breaches going on right now with like Anthem and Target. There's a difference between that and actual business ID theft. Business ID theft is actually the actual impersonation of a business. Data breaches are just, people that could be going into a business's network and possibly stealing potentially harmful information like credit card information, and with the case of Anthem, like insurance, that sort of thing too. With business identity theft and the impersonation side, there's kind of a multifaceted layer to that as well. Most of the criminals that target businesses for ID theft, there are 8 key reasons that they target those businesses. Most of the time, it's because they have larger bank accounts. So they're not going to go to individuals. They're like, let me target a business, because they have more money and that I can maybe be access to, or people that could be associated with that business that could be paying me as a scammer if I misrepresent that business as well.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a specific example. With Better Business Bureau, we had an instance where there was a carpet cleaning business, a small business, and that carpet cleaning business actually had their website mirrored by a con artist. Okay. And in that mirrored website, all they did was change their contact information on there too, so it went to the actual con artist. So when people were researching online, they found that website. They're like, oh, I can get my carpet cleaned. They're an accredited business, that sort of thing. So I'll call them. So they called the scammer, and they came out and were able to take the people's money up front, pay up front with cash. And at that point, they didn't do the work and they ran off. Unfortunately, the people that asked for that service, that came back to the real business and said, you guys had one of your people come out and they didn't do the work, they took the money, what's going on with this? And they're like, well, that's not the employee we had. So there's some confusion with that too. Now that's a very specific form of business ID theft that we've had to deal with. And we helped the business owner a little bit. We talked with them about how they can kind of fix the problem. They were able to get a lawyer involved and get that website shut down. Okay. But unfortunately, that did hurt his business a little bit. So the biggest factor on that is you just have to really watch out and do those web searches. So as a business owner or as people employed with you, always make sure you're Googling or searching your business online to make sure that there's no other website that's mirroring yours out there and trying to take advantage of the hard work that you've done as a business owner of building your reputation. Okay. So that's some of the biggest things. There are other factors that why people target specific businesses for identity theft. Others are that it's kind of easy credit and opening accounts. That's easy to do that. They're able to mirror basically the invoices of a particular business, so they can send invoices to maybe another business to say, we need more light bulbs or whatever, and have them pay them instead of the actual person. Business ID theft is really hard to catch too, so you just have to be, as a business owner or employee, you just really have to keep your eye out for that happening to your business. Okay.
I would imagine a lot of times too with invoicing and 30-day payment for businesses, that a lot of times scam artists could actually get goods pretending to be another business and then not pay for them and have the invoice delivered to the original business as well.
It can go back and forth a little bit. All they have to do is just take your, like I said, just take your logo, your brand as an organization, and they could potentially use that against you. Once again, if you realize that's happening, it's important to contact, law enforcement or an attorney that's associated with your business to see what you can do to try to get that stopped. But unfortunately, this is the bad sign about it. Con artists usually, once they get caught, they move on to the next business.
Right.
So they're really hard to catch, and unfortunately, some of them are overseas, so they're not even local. And website design doesn't have to be something that they can locally do. They can do all this stuff over the phone and get someone else they're working with locally to go out to the person's home for like carpet cleaning or whatever, to get their payment, and then have them come back to and wire the money back to where, overseas again, and then as a consumer, you're out that money, or you're out that service, but
Right.
Unfortunately, as a business owner, your reputation's hurt in the process.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's probably a big reputational aspect to it. So, since you've clarified for us the difference between a data breach, where someone
Yes.
is going into a business and stealing their customers' information, versus business identity theft, where it's the business's information that's actually being used, can you talk a little bit more about some of the common scams beyond the carpet cleaning one that you have seen at the Better Business Bureau?
Some of the biggest scams associated with businesses that we found is one of them is called office supply fraud, which is kind of what I mentioned a minute ago. So that's where maybe another organization is misrepresenting, someone that sells like bulk light bulbs.
Okay.
And what they'll send an invoice to the business and say, oh, well, we're going to get you these light bulbs, and this is the discounted rate, or, whatever. It's $250. I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay.
Well, the business, in most businesses, you have a cycle, you have a finance person, whoever, takes the payments and everything. But sometimes when things are moving fast in a business, and especially smaller businesses, you're just there, you're just signing paperwork. Sometimes as an owner, you just sign away. You have to look at those documents to make sure that you really, did we really purchase light bulbs or what? Or are we just paying this and sending this out, and then, we're giving it to a potential scam company that's out there.
Okay.
That's just out there to take your money. So just be really careful about what we call the office supply fraud, and make sure you're looking at every invoice that's coming in detail, and make sure you have some kind of paperwork to back it up to say, yes, we did purchase this. Here's the inventory list we have. Here's the exact style of light bulbs we have. So just really make sure you keep an eye out for that, because that's probably one of the biggest scams that are affecting small businesses right now.
Okay.
Another one is the Yellow Pages invoices too. So,
Okay.
And that's to be put in a directory. So Yellow Pages is not a trademarked. The Walking Fingers logo is not trademarked.
Right.
So anybody can pretty much use it. So the unfortunate thing is that you'll as a business owner, sometimes you'll be targeted to be in directory listings specifically for some kind of trade organization or whatever. Just make sure you really research that and make sure you know where that's coming from. Is that a real business? Is there a real directory? Let me see your layout. Let me see a real directory. Send it to me so I can make sure that it's actually legitimate, and make sure it's going to the consumers that I'll actually be dealing with too.
Okay.
And you don't just sign up for something that, oh yeah, I would love to get more free get more publication in this. I'll pay, a couple $100 and no big deal.
Okay.
I mean, you're potentially victim of, a scam if you do that. So just be really careful about that stuff too. And then any kind of fundraising opportunities, if you get approached as a business owner for any kind of fundraising, someone comes to your door, or it sends you an email link, or calls and says, hey, would you like to participate in this? Always do your research. As in Better Business Bureau, we always tell people to research the organization, go to bbb.org, check out the company, make sure that they're, someone you really want to be working with, and make sure they're even real in the first place too.
Okay. You mentioned email links. I think that what we see at the Center for individuals and for data breaches, that the use of email links to collect personal information and then go on to steal identities is really, really problematic. And so learning about how to recognize a phishing scam, tools and tips for that, any advice or anything you've seen with that?
The biggest thing is if you get an email that just seems weird, I mean, trust your gut. And that's what we always tell people, just trust your gut. You can always contact that organization or whatever directly and ask them, is this something we're going to deal with? So don't open emails that seem weird, and especially when you do, don't click on links that seem mysterious. So you can usually hover over a link and it'll show you how where it's actually going to direct you. And if it looks really long and okay, there's a lot of letters and numbers, and it doesn't go to something that's that seems to be connected to that organization, don't click it, because that could download malware onto your computer, which could, once again, open your computer up to being hacked.
We have a really great video actually on our website that demonstrates exactly the hovering thing that you're talking about and walks you through how to recognize
Good.
a
Oh, that's
phishing email. So
fantastic.
it's a good resource for people to use.
That's fantastic. And be careful on social media too. I mean, it's the same. It goes the same thing with email and social media as well. So if you have a business, and you have, and most businesses do have a Facebook page or Twitter page or whatever. If you get sent messages that just seem weird and say to click on a link or whatever, just be careful about that, because once again, clicking on that, especially when you're on a business computer at work, I mean, that could potentially. I mean, there's a lot of firewalls and blocks in most businesses, but that could open you up to getting hacked into your business network as well. So that's just something to be aware of. No one should be playing on their computer when they're at work anyway on Facebook or social Twitter, but some people do. But that's just something to be aware of, and make sure there's a good social media policy in place for all of your employees, so that way they know not to do that while they're, like I said, on work computers as well.
Okay, I think you've actually jumped perfectly into our next question, which is what should businesses be doing to protect themselves?
And some of the biggest things are, make sure you have some good passwords in place for your business to protect yourself.
Okay.
Don't use the same password for everything in your office.
Yeah, that's just that should be true for in your business life and in your personal life.
Oh, for sure.
And again, pushing our fabulous resources. There's a wonderful article on our website
Yeah.
about how to create a password that you can both remember and that will keep you from having to repeat over and over. So,
well, that's great to know. Actually, I probably need to go to that too from our personal side as well. But another thing too is that with every organization, you'll always have it's just nature of the industry. But everyone's always, you're going to have employees that just leave, or that you had to let go, or they moved on to other things. So you always want to make sure your passwords are updated regularly too. Unfortunately, especially with some social media accounts, you have one social media account and one password for some of those.
Right.
Most of them you have administrator access, but and you can easily unblock people on that category. But make sure you're changing your passwords every time an employee leaves, because they're still going to have access to it when they leave also. And make sure to try to get with them as well if they do have access on their phones, because sometimes even when you change the password, they still have access until they log off.
Okay.
So make sure that that's kind of cleared, and make sure you keep kind of the personal phone and the social media and any other personal data away from their smartphones, and make sure that's only on work-related material as well.
Okay.
So that's some of the biggest thing. I mean, the biggest thing is password control and monitoring, and making sure you have a plan in place in case something does happen. So, and plus a systematic approach to your office. Make sure that, for instance, if you're doing, all of your finances, like I said, for the invoices that come in, make sure there's one person handling that. So that way, because even if you break it into two people, that second person might not realize that, you've already paid for that same invoice, but now you have a different one, and it's, same light bulbs on this side and light bulbs on this side, and now you've paid two different companies, and one's the con artist and one's the real company. So that one person in control of especially the financial aspect is really important too.
Okay. I saw a statistic earlier that indicated, I think it was in about 2010, in the state of Colorado, 80% of the business identity theft cases were around businesses that had already been shut down. So the businesses had closed down, and then somebody found that information and began using it to fraudulently. So if you are the owner of a business that has shut down for some reason, what should you be doing to keep that from happening to you down the road? Well,
the biggest thing, if you've been shut down as a business, or you went bankrupt or whatever, the biggest thing is to inform your consumers right away that you've closed down shop, and make sure everything is taken off the websites. Contact your web service that you use as a website, and make sure that's shut down as well. So that's some of the biggest thing to do too, is be proactive, so that way an instance like that, unfortunately doesn't happen. Because, to be honest, this day and age, technology is moving so fast that, it's hard to keep up even on search engines to see, what's real, what's real time, what's maybe 2 or 3 years old, what's been kind of lingering for a while. But the more research you do as a consumer when you're shopping around for those businesses, the better also, because even us as business owners, you're consumers as well. So, just got to do your research.
Okay. Now, I think that for businesses, the rules about the timelines for fraud protection as well as the reporting requirements are a little bit different than they are for individuals, and may be shorter in terms of the banks protecting you from fraudulent activity.
Yeah.
So should businesses, how often should they be looking at their accounts or checking those sorts of things in order to see if their information's been used fraudulently?
All the time. I mean,
Okay.
it should be regularly. I mean, that's a difficult question to put like a timeline on, like a daily or weekly. I mean, but it shouldn't be. I mean, you should always be doing audits all the time. You should have. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have a third party come in and audit your financial information as well to make sure that everything's in line with what your person that's in house has been doing as well, to make sure that everything seems consistent. Because I mean, if you feel a blip in your financials, I mean, there's probably something that went awry, and it might not be anybody's fault in there. It could be, like maybe we were like a victim of like some kind of identity theft approach or whatever. Maybe someone was able to get into our data, and maybe, or whatever. But I mean, regularly is probably a good answer to that question.
Okay.
Actually,
Well, you've actually segued us again very nicely into our next question, which is
Okay.
if you do see these blips in your financial statements or some other indication that you've been victimized,
Yeah.
what do you do? What's the first thing you should do? What do you do?
Well, and some of the biggest things is you want to protect your consumers and your consumers' information. I mean, let them know about it. Let the consumers that maybe have become a victim, like for instance, that carpet cleaning business, the consumers that fell for the actual con artist, whatever, it's important to contact them and say, okay, so here's the deal. Like, give it to them, straight out. This is what happened. Our website was mimicked. And then our contact information was changed. We apologize. What can we do? And you might have to make nicey a little bit, and go in there and try to and help fix the problem that con artist already created.
Okay.
So the biggest thing is to let your consumers, that your customers
Okay.
know that it's really happened. And you've seen that with not just identity theft victims, but also the data breaches, especially the big ones, because they've been in the news a
Absolutely.
lot. It's important to let them know about it, so that way, if they need to have some kind of data protection or ID theft protection or whatever, they can do that on their side, and they're happier about that too. So this is the biggest thing. If the problem persists, I mean, you should contact your local law enforcement, and you should contact a lawyer. Talk about seeing if you can get that shut down. I mean, if it's a website, you need to get that shut down, and also contact the web hosting service as well. So you can do some easy searches online of figuring out every web domain that's hosted and figure out where it's hosted from, the city it's hosted in, I mean, the detailed information.
Okay.
So then you can go through and work with that web service to say, hey, here's our legitimate business. This one looks like that it could be, they're mirroring our information. Is there any way to get that shut down? They may be able to do that as well.
Okay. So when you start to see this going on, what sort of information should you be collecting and passing on to the lawyers and the law enforcement agents that you're contacting?
Everything.
Okay.
Screenshots of
Okay.
the information. I mean, if you had reached out to that particular con artist or person, let them know about the conversation you had. In some cases, it has been former employees that will take that business because they already know how the business model runs,
Right.
and they'll try to make it their own, but they'll mimic their old business. So let them know. Like, if I had past employees that I've had problems with, maybe it could be this, but it might be worth investigating if they could potentially have been someone that was out to harm me. So let them know of all the details and that nature, and just be open to, giving them the details that they need too.
Okay. When we're talking to individuals who've had their identities compromised, one of the first things that we tell them are to check their credit reports.
Okay.
And to
Good.
investigate whether or not any fraudulent accounts have been opened, and to dispute those with whatever,
Yes. The credit bureau.
right, with the credit bureaus or whatever
Yeah.
financial institutions might be involved. Is that the same advice that you would give to a business? Do
Yeah.
they?
It doesn't hurt to always contact them too. The credit
Okay.
bureaus. You have Experian, Equifax, and then
TransUnion.
TransUnion. Yeah.
They're our partner.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we
Oh, there
can't
we
forget
go.
them.
Okay, we
Yes.
can't forget them then. Okay, but it's always important to just contact them, let them know, and you might be able to, as a business too, you may be able to go on there and put alerts on there too as
Okay,
well. So,
right.
I mean, that's an additional step that you might want to do as
Okay.
well to protect more of your financial information and make sure that your financial information isn't victimized also. So it's not just your reputation, it's your finances too, but you have to protect both equally.
Okay. And as a business owner, if you've seen that your business's information has been compromised, how often would you say that should alert you to the fact that your personal information might be at risk as well?
That's a good question. I mean, it could be because obviously most of our personal information is housed in a business. So
Right.
if your business has been breached, or if you know of anything about if the identity of the business has been taken, I mean, there's a possibility that the data that they've collected on you, your social security number, obviously your address, where you live, but other important information like your contacts, I mean, everything you put in your database at work could have been compromised as well.
Okay.
So it's important to think about that aspect, and that's why it's important to probably contact, like I said, law enforcement. Maybe talk to a lawyer, and maybe they'll guide you on being able to get in touch with an investigator that can look into seeing what could have been affected and what could have not have been affected as well. And that's why these big, huge companies, like I said, like the Anthem and the Targets, they have a big, huge staff available, and
Right.
they have lawyers and everything that can go in there and do that really quickly. As a small business, you really don't have that. So it's important that you start taking steps like that if you think you have been victimized.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about a business's information being used for fraudulent purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And you've mentioned several times things like Target and Anthem. These are huge
Yeah.
companies who, we're not talking about their identity being stolen, but instead we're talking about them being breached and their customers'
correct.
information being compromised. Talk a little bit about small business data breaches. How frequently do you see that? Are those companies as likely to be breached as a Target or an Anthem?
They could be, and we were kind of having this conversation earlier, but you can kind of think of it, so data breaches and business ID theft are two separate things, and they operate a little differently. So for a business identity theft, usually you would think that the smaller business might be targeted more, and the reason is because it's easier to gain access to a website and it's more difficult for that business to help shut that down. So you're able to operate a little longer. So in that instance, that's probably a little bit bigger for them. But when it comes to data breaches, when the data breaches actually happen, it's the smaller business is a little bit less likely to be targeted because they're trying to go after the bigger fish out there. Because they want all of the credit card information, they want all that social security information, they want more because they'll be able to get more financial gains from that, if that kind of makes a little bit of sense. If they go after a smaller business, yeah, they're able to get into their equipment a little easier, but they're not going to get as much of the hardcore money that they're really looking for. They're looking for financial gains out of this on both sides of it. However, like I said, with the data breaches, they're going after the bigger fish. With the ID theft, they're going after the smaller but both instances, they're able to get better financial gains out of it.
Okay. I think that with data breaches, because the ones that we're exposed to most often are these giant ones, that we
Yes.
tend to think that it's often, some guy in a hoodie hacking into a computer somewhere, trying to steal our
Like
information.
Matrix or whatever.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But what we've seen is that, almost, I think the numbers, depending on what study you read, can be up to about 50% of data breaches are actually caused by people on the inside.
Okay.
And sometimes
Makes
that's
sense.
malicious insiders who are
Yeah.
stealing information. And sometimes it's just somebody who's screwed up.
Yeah.
And I think that those are probably the things that are fairly common within smaller businesses
Yes.
for whom there isn't an IT department to be dealing with all of this, for people who are going to be easier to get with a phishing scam or
Yes.
something like that. And so
You're right.
I think that talking a little bit about what small businesses can do, beyond worrying about the IT controls, but just on a day-to-day basis in order to protect customer information might have some value. So what would be some
Yeah.
key points that you think they could take a look at? You talked already about limiting information, like the
Yes.
social media controls, making sure that you limit access to information on a need-to-know basis only.
Yes, and the network. Make sure you have a secure network, and that's a big thing
passwords.
too. And then the passwords, like we talked about. But that's a big thing because you're right. The bigger companies are able to put more money into protecting their data. Smaller companies are out there just to do their services and their products and get that started. They're less likely to hire an IT person. And make sure, if it, once again, and it's just mobile phones too, it's a smartphone age, this day and age, everything's connected.
Right.
You have to keep your business separate. And that's the thing with small business too. I know as a business owner, it's easy. And if you're the owner of a business, it's different. But if you have employees that have a lot of access to data on their smartphones or their tablets, sometimes you're unable to, unless you log out of like certain areas, like I said, like the social media sites, then you're on there for forever.
Right.
So the biggest thing is making sure that you have full control of that as a business owner, as a small business owner.
I think the move towards bring your own device, that becomes more and more common, and it makes that even harder to control. And
that's an opportunity to talk about how it probably is important to invest in having separate devices just for your business, even the mobile devices, and having those separate items available for your employees that they can go out, but make it clear that, according to our policy, that you can only use this as your business related and this as your and your personal use is your personal. Don't mix both.
Right.
I think it's very important, but I think it's really important to have a policy in place as a small business that, that when they are, what's the word, when they're signing up for a business, or when they're getting employed as a business. I'm trying to think, like employed. It's like, wait a minute. But when they're like filling out their applications, when they first hire them, make sure there's a policy in place and they see it and they sign off on it, on exactly how they control the information within the company. So, and make sure make sure the lawyer sees that before you start giving it to your employees to sign also, but make sure there's a clear policy about, if anything is created in the business organization, if you create any product or whatever, that's the property of the organization and the business. Mm-hmm. So make sure you have a clear written policy on that and make sure it's understood by them and they sign off on that and you have that paperwork available. So that if that person were to turn out to be a bad actor and they go out and they start taking your company information, you have like a signed copy and say, hey, easy with a lawyer, I'm like, hey, I have a signed copy that they would not do this. They wouldn't take my information for their personal gains, and they are. And then you have some kind of, possible legal recourse against them that's easier than just, not having something and being like, well, I think they were an employee, but, you have to go through more hoops.
Okay.
So make sure you have that policy in place and make sure that every employee in your organization signs off on it as well.
Okay. I think that is key, the planning piece, bringing when you're onboarding employees. Yes. I think it's also really key that you have a procedure in place for when employees leave. And you did talk about this a little bit with restricting their access, but knowing exactly what information you're going to have to shut down or collect from them before they leave.
Yes.
We had, a couple weeks ago, we had a data breach workshop, and the FBI and the Secret Service were here with us to talk to folks about this kind of stuff. And one of the key points that came out of that, too, was that everyone should essentially begin to expect now that they are going to be breached in some way, whether it's the malicious outsider or the accidental insider or wherever that comes from, that they will have a breach and that there's responsibilities that come along with that. And that not only should you have a plan in place for how to information sharing within the company, but you should have a plan in place to respond to an incident.
Yes.
So I think it's really important to stress that creating and practicing an incident response plan before your information is breached, having templates for the alerts to your consumers in place, right, is key to successfully recovering from a breach. Because for small businesses, one breach and the reputational damage that can come from that could easily be enough to close you down.
Yeah, it can close you down. We have resources on our website, bbb.org/breach. That has information on what business owners can do in case they are breached as a small business. And there's complete tips on what to do if you're breached just with regular information, maybe like some credit card data or maybe some address information. But also, like in the case of Anthem, that was a little more severe because that involved actual like social security numbers, dates of birth, stuff that could potentially be used more for identity theft issues.
Right.
So there's steps on how to do that too. So that's bbb.org/breach, and that will give you a step-by-step thing of what to do if in case you think your business might be victimized.
Excellent.
As well. And I mean, a couple of things. I mean, I could talk about just a couple of quick things about what to do, what to do on that side. Are we still talking? We're still talking kind of about data breach a little bit, but it's the thing about with data breach is that they're kind of like, even though they're two separate entities, they run together a little bit. Because if your data gets breached, I mean, that information could be used against you to like represent your business
Sure.
in an identity theft situation as well. The biggest thing, like you said, is to have a policy in place, but also have some templates in place in case it does happen. So you don't want to take a wait and see approach. So make sure you have safeguards in place, but make sure you have maybe like a press release template or something available so you can alert the public about it too. Because you don't want to just sit quiet and just be like, okay, well, I know I've been breached. I'll just work for the FBI. I mean, talk with the FBI and talk to your local law enforcement what to do, but have something ready to alert the public about it. They're going to need to know. It's going to be embarrassing. It's it might take a temporary hit, but if you wait longer, it's going to hurt your company even more.
Right.
So that's one of the biggest things that we always tell anybody to do. But also, you want to take a preemptive strike by just freezing your credit reports if you realize that does happen too. You can freeze, or you can put an alert on your credit reports. Freezing it will stop from any activity actually happening.
Right.
Alert will just let you know that something is going on, but they just want you to kind of be aware about it as well. And then, if you have been victimized and if your consumers have been victimized, think about offering free service like credit reporting, monitoring services to them. That's kind of also a little bit of a PR approach as well, but it helps your consumers too. It lets them know that you care about them and you're like, I'm worried about your information too. Ours has been hurt. Yours could be hurt as well. We're going to offer you this free service just in case, because we don't want to inconvenience you anymore as a consumer, because we still want your business. We still want you to come back. So that's the big thing. Those are some of the big things to be aware of too. And it's just be careful out there. This technology, this day and age, it's like you said, with that data, it's every business could be affected by some level of breach, whether it's internal or external. Your biggest thing as a business owner or employee is just to be vigilant about it and just be aware that it could go on, and just keep those practices and procedures in place so you make sure that it doesn't happen. And if it does, you're able to respond to it as well.
Sounds good. Anything else that you want to add or cover? Make sure that folks know before we sign off for the day.
Well, the biggest thing is just look at those search engines. Your company. I think the biggest way you could be a victim of business ID theft is by a lot of those mirroring. Websites are easy to create this day and age. You can go on any web service and create a website, and you can copy, the same design as another company, and you can paste it, and then you can manipulate things, in Photoshop or whatever. There's techniques out there that you could easily do something with. So the biggest thing is just go through those searches, make sure no one is using your business for financial gains, and if it does, you need to take an immediate approach to get that shut down. My suggestion is not to confront the people that are involved in that. You don't want to involve.
We're not promoting vigilante justice.
Yeah, don't do it that way, because you don't want to get in an uncomfortable and also a dangerous situation. But you, as a business owner, you need to protect your brand, you need to protect your business, you need to protect your consumers. The biggest thing to do is just to, do whatever you can to try to get it shut down, work with law enforcement, work with a lawyer, and just take care of the problem. But keep everybody in the know. Keep your employees known about it, and also keep your customers aware of that it's happening as well, too.
Sounds good. All right, we're going to give folks that are watching some resources for additional information. I've mentioned a couple of things that are available on the Center for Identity's website. There's a whole section devoted to small businesses. And it sounds like you guys have a lot of stuff that's available as well.
Mm-hmm. We have the website up, which is great.
Yep.
bbb.org/central-texas. And then there's that one, the data breach one, for anybody interested, bbb.org/breach. So it's pretty easy. You can just throw that in there instead if you want to look at that as well.
If we have any questions from our audience, we're happy to take those now. If not, it looks like someone's typing a question.
Someone's typing away right there. That's fine. Yeah, I think this is important information. I'm glad you guys hosted this event. I think it's definitely timely with, like I said, the data breaches that have been going on.
Right.
More are just going to keep happening. But also, like I said, with the smaller businesses being victims of identity theft out there, it's important to know that it could happen.
Right.
And it has happened.
Right. There's a lot of focus, I think, on individual identity theft. That's what we generally tend to think of. And
yes.
The business version of that is really complicated.
And it's just as dangerous and sometimes, more costly, obviously, too. If someone's out there misrepresenting you, taking your money, that could be going to your organization, and then not doing the work either. I mean,
Right.
that not only hurts you
Reputational
financially,
elements are
but it hurts
key.
your reputation as well.
So it wasn't actually a question. It was our wonderful social media expert indicating that she shared all of our links on Twitter. And
Fantastic.
that,
Okay, good.
Our hashtag is ID Talks. So
Perfect. Okay,
you can
great.
check that out if you're looking for additional information.
Fantastic. And I think you guys are recording this too, right?
We are too. This will be
Okay.
on our website, and hopefully you guys can share
We'll
it
share
as
it
well.
on our website as well, bb.org/central-texas.
Okay. Well, I think that's it for us today. Thank
All
you
right.
so much for joining us. This
Yeah,
was
of
really
course.
great information.
It's been a pleasure.
And we'll see y'all at our next webcast.
Sounds great. Bye, y'all.